and he feels very comfortable in this offense. This is a rhythm and timing offense. It's based in the West Coast system, which you're very familiar with. And I think that, it's going to be very quarterback friendly.
Welcome back to a brand new video. Today, we're going to be talking about Justin Fields and why I'm a little bit worried about the situation that he's being put into with the Chicago Bears. But before we hop into the content of today's video, if you guys are new to the channel, be sure to subscribe and drop a like on the video if you guys do enjoy it. With all that being said, let's hop into the video about Justin Fields and the situation he's in Chicago. In 2021, the Bears traded their 20th overall pick and a 5th rounder, in addition to a 2022 first round pick and 4th round pick, to secure Justin Fields in the 2021 NFL Draft. They traded up 9 spots to get Fields, and many were pretty surprised to see Fields fall that far in the NFL Draft. People thought that he could have been the 2nd or 3rd quarterback picked either by the Jets or the 49ers, but after some of those teams took flyers on a different quarterback, the Bears just waited until Fields got to the prime spot, and they made a big move to go ahead and get the Ohio State play caller. Fields was entering a pretty weird spot when it came to the Bears. It kind of felt like their defense was aging with some of their better players like Akeem Hicks and Khalil Mack. Really getting on the wrong side of 30. And then you had a coach that was really trying to win games and get some success right away so he could save his job in Matt Nagy. But overall, the Bears roster was not spectacular, especially for a rookie that needs some support in the coaching staff and in skill position rooms. I felt like the Bears didn't really have a lot of targets for Fields to go to or a great offensive line that could protect him. So already as a rookie, Fields was entering a tough spot, and the year went as expected. Fields did not start the year because the Bears signed Andy Dalton due to Matt Nagy trying to save his job. Dalton did not play good for the Bears and ended up getting hurt. That's when Justin Fields took over. Fields missed a couple of games, and then Andy Dalton got back in. So it was kind of a rough year for the Bears as far as their quarterback situation went. So as a rookie, Fields completed 59% of his passes for 1,870 yards, 7 touchdowns, and 10 interceptions. And that was a pretty common theme for the rookie quarterbacks last year. Trevor Lawrence had 12 touchdowns and 17 interceptions. Zach Wilson also had a negative touchdown to interception ratio. So it's not like Fields was the guy that had a horrible season and all the other rookies took off without him. This quarterback class really had a lot of promise and nobody really stuck out that much last year. So it's going to be a really important year too of who steps up. And I have my questions about the Bears and what they're able to do to support Justin Fields going into his 2nd season. To start off the offseason, the Bears traded away their best player in Khalil Mack. They received a 2nd round pick and a 6th round pick for the 2023 draft, and they sent him to the Los Angeles Chargers and reunited him with Brandon Staley, who was Mack's position coach with the Bears in 2018. I know at the time it was kind of a crazy trade. Khalil Mack has been really the staple of Chicago since he's been there, and definitely one of, if not their best player every single year of his stint there. I can definitely see how Bears fans were a little bit upset about trading away Mack, but you got to see it as kind of a rebuilding team. I know fans of teams don't really like to hear it, but the Bears are kind of in a rebuilding stage. They have a new coach, they have a new GM, and they're trading away a lot of their older players and getting rid of a lot of their older players to kind of get some youth in there, try to find some developmental players, and also just get their younger guys experience. And that's really what the Bears showed everybody that they were doing this offseason. So on top of trading Khalil Mack, they got rid of Akeem Hicks, one of their better defensive linemen as well. And then instead of franchise tagging Allen Robinson again or trying to give him a boatload of money, they ended up letting him walk, and he went on to sign with the LA Rams on a contract. And the Bears relatively stayed pretty quiet during the offseason. They didn't make a ton of splash signings. They really signed some key veterans here and there. They didn't really go all out, and they're kind of ramping up towards that for the next couple of years once they get some more youth in there and figure out what some of these players can develop and turn into good players this season. And they can show the Bears front office that they don't really need to invest all that money into these veterans when they have some developmental and good players already at that position. So I think that's really what the Bears are looking forward to this season, kind of developing these players and seeing what they can turn out to be. And then in the 2023 offseason and the 2024 offseason, spending all that money while they have Fields on a rookie contract and surrounding him with all the talent that they can get. But I think this year is really kind of a developmental year and seeing where they're at and what players are salvageable and who they can build upon in their future. But to talk about what the Bears really did to help Justin Fields this offseason, I really want to mention the offensive line because that's really where they put most of their effort this offseason as far as the offense went. Now, rookie Tevin Jenkins, who they traded up for in the second round of the 2021 NFL draft, he will be actually coming back this year and able to play. He missed a lot of the season last year with a neck injury and only started 2 games, so having him protecting Justin Fields' blind side this year instead of Jason Peters, who they kind of got as a stopgap player, would definitely be beneficial, as what I mentioned earlier about finding key developmental players and seeing if they can really be a part of the Bears' future. And then to address their center position, they went out and got Lucas Patrick, the former Green Bay Packers offensive lineman, to slide in at center for them. Early in his career, he was mostly kind of a backup for the Packers, but the last 2 years he's had 28 starts, and he was pretty solid for them last year, so he's probably going to slide in and start for the Bears at center, which was one of their weaker spots on their line last year. And then the Bears also signed Dakota Dozier from the Minnesota Vikings on a 1-year deal. He's currently expected to play right guard for the Chicago Bears going into the season. So the only 2 starters that the Bears brought back from last year on their offensive line was Larry Borom at right tackle and Cody Whitehair at left guard. Now, we'll be interested to see how they replace James Daniels. He was their right guard last year and was probably their best player on that line. He signed a pretty big deal with the Steelers, and again, going back to what I mentioned earlier, the Bears weren't really interested in signing these free agents to big contracts this year, so I think that was another reason why they didn't really try to bring back James Daniels on a fairly big contract. And then in the draft, the Bears also selected Braxton Jones out of Southern Utah in the 5th round. I don't know if he's going to amount anything. I mean, he is a 5th round pick, but it is more resources that they put into the offensive line. And it's a pretty good thing that the Bears invested this much into their line this offseason, because they did have the 22nd ranked offensive line last year according to Pro Football Focus. So anything to get more out of that offensive line and improve it will be very beneficial for Justin Fields going into his second season. The Bears didn't have a 1st round pick in the 2022 NFL draft, but they did spend their 2 seconds to shore up that secondary, which have lost some pieces. They drafted Kyler Gordon with their 1st pick in the 2022 draft. Out of Washington, he will come in and be a very solid secondary piece for them. And they compare him with Jalen Johnson, and now they have a pretty good young pair of cornerbacks in the back end of their defense. The Bears in their youth movement also got rid of Tashawn Gibson this past offseason, and to replace him, they got Jaquan Brisker out of Penn State. He will step in and play right next to Eddie Jackson. So you can see that the Bears are really adding some youth to the back end of their defense. But many people, including myself, during the draft was like, what are the Bears doing? They need to surround Justin Fields with some talent. And that didn't come on until the 3rd round when they selected Velus Jones Jr. out of Tennessee. And I think that he will be a very good weapon for Justin Fields. Apparently, him and Fields were talking weeks before the draft how they wanted to team up. They were pretty good friends before he actually became a Bear, and that's kind of amounted to a pretty good relationship that they've had in Chicago. And it seems like their chemistry so far in OTAs and minicamp has been really good, and I wonder if that will carry over to the NFL season and really show up on the field during game days. And talking about minicamp and OTAs, it seems like Justin Fields has gone off to a good start. A lot of positive things have been said about him from his teammates and coaches. Their new center, Lucas Patrick, had some pretty good things to say about him. He said, fast, he can get moving pretty quick. He's got a live arm. I mean, there were a few throws he made where the ball, it's like it keeps getting faster in the air. And I mentioned earlier the relationship between Jones, their new drafted receiver, and Justin Fields, and he said on Sirius XM last Friday, Justin Fields' work ethic is insane. He's in the facility every day. I know with this week off, a lot of people aren't there right now, but he's still in the building every day. That motivates me to see my quarterback putting in the work. There isn't a better thing that you really want to hear from fellow teammates and coaches than your young franchise quarterback is really working his tail off to improve and get better. You see a lot of these dudes get drafted and they're not really focusing on their craft, focusing on the playbook, trying to become a better player. And it seems like Fields is not following in those footsteps, and he's really focusing on getting better and really improving as a year 2 quarterback. And there's nothing really more you can ask for out of Fields as he enters the offseason program. Now, as far as the Bears' coaching staff goes, they hired Matt Eberflus as their head coach, the ex-Colts defensive coordinator. And I was a little bit questionable about this because I believe when you have a young quarterback that is supremely talented like Justin Fields and kind of need some coaches to develop him, you want to get an offensive mind who has a lot of experience developing quarterbacks, or one that has, unique ideas like a Sean McVay or Matt LaFleur. I think you need one of those guys to kind of get the most out of a young quarterback, and I don't know how good Matt Eberflus is going to be at getting the most out of Fields. It's going to rely on his hiring And he hired Luke Getsy as his offensive coordinator, who has spent most of his career with the Green Bay Packers. He was their pass game coordinator last year, and before that, he was their quarterbacks coach for a few years. So he had some experience with Aaron Rodgers, who is one of the best quarterbacks in the league. So he knows what a good quarterback looks like and what traits that they need to be successful. But again, he hasn't really developed an actual quarterback, a young guy who needs to step in. I mean, the Packers drafted Jordan Love, for example, and he hasn't really amounted to anything. Many see that as a wasted pick now because Love was supposed to take over for Rodgers in a year or two, and now Rodgers signed a long extension with the Packers because they're not confident in Love being able to be a good quarterback for them right as we enter the season. And then the Bears hired Andrew Janocko as their quarterback coach, and both of these guys, Luke Getsy and Janocko, are very young, so they don't have a ton of experience in the league, and that's not always a bad thing. I think that they could have some young ideas and be able to get the most out of Fields, but I just think if the Bears really wanted to get the most out of Fields, they would have hired an offensive coach, and then as far as their coordinators go, they would have hired some experienced guys in the league that kind of know what to do as far as getting the best out of their quarterback, at least their quarterback coach or offensive coordinator, just one of the two, making them an experienced veteran to know how to develop a quarterback. So I'll be very interested to see how this coaching staff gets the most out of him, but I can't say I'm too intrigued with the Bears coaching staff. I think Eberflus is a good coach. I think he definitely knows defense. I mean, the Colts have had some of the top defenses in the league the last few years, but as the league moves to an offensive league, I just wonder if the Bears should have tried to go all in on getting an offensive coach to try to get the most out of Fields. But as far as the Bears' offense goes, Cole Kmet said, "I don't want to get too much into detail with it, but Justin's on the move a lot, and I think he does well with that. That's been exciting to see, and you see the types of throws he can make with his legs and on the run and off schedule. So it seems like the Bears' offense is really going to utilize his strengths, which is very important. At Ohio State, they really utilized his movement. They brought him out of the pocket a lot and let him throw the ball down the field. So I'll be really interested to see if the Bears follow that same trend going into the 2022 NFL season. But although I have my questions about Fields' development with the Chicago Bears, it is going to be very exciting to watch. I don't expect the Bears to be great next year due to them kind of filtering out their better but older players and expensive players and kind of moving towards a rebuild. This is really a developmental year for the Bears, and I'll be really looking out for some of these younger players to flash and kind of show that they can be some solid players in the league. But anyway, thank you guys so much for watching the video. If you guys are new to the channel, be sure to subscribe and drop a like on the video if you guys did enjoy it. Please let me know what you guys think of Justin Fields and if you trust the environment that the Bears have surrounded him with, or if you have similar questions as I do. But anyway, thank you guys so much for watching the video, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.